Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're continuing in the Ben La'ashri. As we try to learn every week from the Sefer Ben La'ashri that it should be a schus for the tzaddik Miranana, Rabbi Yitzchak HaKoyim and Asher Anshel Hoberman, who, as we know, unfortunately did not have any children. And he wrote that whoever learns and repeats the Chidusha from a Sefer, he'll be a Me'ez Yosher for them. And we know that the Ben La'ashri, the tzaddik Miranana, was an awesome tzaddik who was Meiser Nefesh himself to learn Torah in abject poverty. So the Torah is a special quality that we will gain tremendous insight from, and it will help us to understand and approach the Parsha in a new way. And the Ben La'ashri begins, Eila told us Noach ish tzaddik, tamim haya b'dorasav. So the Ben La'ashri is going to have 4 questions on the grammar and the stylistic way the Torah writes about Noach. The first question is, why does it have to say Noach's name twice? Now, it's not a derech chibo, which we see in other places where Hashem called Yaakov twice, Avraham Avinu twice. There, Hashem was calling out to those individuals, to Avraham Avinu and to Yaakov. Here, the Torah is describing Noach, so it doesn't make sense to say Noach's name twice. The second question is, the word b'dorasav in his generation seems not to be exact, because b'dorasav spans many generations. It should have said, B'doiroi Lashon Yachid. The third question is a very interesting question. At the end of last week's Parsha, in Perek Vav Pasuk Ches, it says, V'noach motza chen. That Noach found favor in the eyes of his people, in the eyes of Hashem. According to one pshat, Noach was the first person that was born with a thumb, which allowed them to hold shovels and axes and picks much easier, and allowed the plantings and the plowing and the harvesting of food to be much more productive. Other pshatim was that he was the one that actually invented different farming materials. That's why the Noach Matzachem. But what's interesting, says the Ben La'ashri, a very fascinating Rashi. Rashi there says he wasn't kedai, he wasn't worthy to be saved. Says the Ben La'ashri, I don't understand. V'adavar pella. It's a wonder. The Torah itself describes Noach as a ish tzaddik tamim. So how could you say it's not kedai? HaKadosh Baruch Hu ma'atzmai made a love, and the HaKadosh Baruch Hu later on says ki oischo reisi tzaddik l'fnei b'dor hazeh. That Hashem Himself says that I see that you are a tzaddik. So it doesn't make sense that Rashi says that he wasn't really worthy. It doesn't fit with the description that the Torah gives of Noach. Moreover, the Ben La'ashri says we have a rule in Pirkei Avos, Havidalnes kol adam kav zchus. It doesn't make sense that you would not judge Noach favorably. The fourth question is that the way Hashem said to Noach, within you I see that you're a tzaddik. It wasn't meant oischo re'isi. It should have said, ki risich, I see that you're a tzaddik, and therefore I'm going to save you. So it comes out that we have 4 questions. Why does it say the name Noach twice? Why does it say that Noach was a tzaddik in multiple generations? In addition, why did Rashi say that even though the Torah describes Noach as a big tzaddik, he wasn't worthy to be saved? And the fourth question is, what does it mean when Hashem says, Ki oischa, I see that you are a tzaddik? It seems a little funny. Should have said, I see that you're a tzaddik. Well, the Taritz calls that, to answer all this, says the Ben La'ashri, there's a fundamental yesod that we have to understand. Nakdim b'Gemara. We're going to bring an interesting Gemara in Chulin, Daf Kuf Lamed Tesamid Beis, Moshe min haTorah minayin. A question that the Gemara in the Chulin brings down. How do we know Moshe is in the Torah? So it says, Ki b'shagam hu basar. Last week's parsha, when Hashem says that he was upset that he created man, and man did an does averas all day. Why? Because he is made out of basar. B'shagam is a funny word. It's not the word that I would have chosen. So, which means to say that it's only darsheni. There's a drasha here, and the Gemara there says, you know why the Torah wrote b'shagam? Because that's a reference to Moshe Rabbeinu. So the Ben La'ashri says it doesn't make any sense. The whole Torah is all Moshe Rabbeinu, right? You want to see where Moshe Rabbeinu is? Open up Sefer Shmos. You see Moshe Rabbeinu's names hundreds of times: Vayikra, Bamidbar, Dvarim, and if not, the whole Torah is Moshe Rabbeinu. It's called Torah's Moshe. So what's the Gemara asking? Where is there a remez to Moshe Rabbeinu? And the remez that they found is Bishagam. What remez is that? So it says because the gematria of Bishagam is Moshe. Doesn't make any sense. So we ask a question upon a question, says the Ben Lashri. So to tie everything up together, to understand the way the pasuk was written and the question that the Gemara has in Chulun, which seems to be a very unusual question, where do we know Moshe Rabbeinu from? It doesn't make sense. There's a famous Rabbeinu Bechaya that says Shenoach Nitzal B'schus Moshe. This Rabbeinu Bechaya is brought in last week's Parsha, I think, Bereshis Perek Vav Pasuk Gimel, that Moshe saved Noach's life. How did Moshe Rabbeinu save Noach's life? As it says in the Tikkunei Zoyar, that Moshe Rabbeinu Schus helped Moshe. What's Pshat? Why Moshe Rabbeinu specifically? Why not Yaakov Avinu? Yaakov also came from Noach. Avram Avinu came from Noach. Right? Why Noach? So as we mentioned, it says in the Tikkunei Zoyar that Nishmasei de Moshe Rabbeinu olav shalom shetala HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'Noach, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put the neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu in Noach. Why? Because Noach and Moshe and Sheis and Hevel all had the same neshama. V'zeh sheshalach Chachmei Nizal haloi b'Torah ksiv the Basia Bas Paroi karasa Moshe Hashem min hamayim mishisu. Right? We know that Basia called Moshe Rabbeinu Moshe because she took him out from the waters. So why don't we say that's the remes to Moshe Rabbeinu? Why did it say Bishagam, which is Gematria Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Is the place that we learn on Moshe Rabbeinu. The answer is that if you look at the similarities between the life of Noach and Moshe, there are profound similarities. Noach was saved from the Mei HaMabel, Aidei HaTeva. Moshe Rabbeinu also was saved from the waters, right, through a Teva. V'kvar hivanu le'el. Harav HaKodesh Moshe Reb Kabrina. So we learn from here, number one, that in the neshama of Moshe, of Noach, was Moshe Rabbeinu. There's a very interesting drasha that the tzaddik of Moshe Kabrina brings down on the pasuk in Tehillim. Al tat bi'af avdecha. What does that mean? Shalei ta'aseh ketefel va'aroi. David HaMelech says, don't make me like a secondary person, right? That's important, right? We know when you make a bracha, there's the ikr and the tafel. What do you make a bracha on? The ikr. So David HaMelech, David Hashem, always make me like the ikr, the kavuadik, not something that's temporary, something that's secondary. Ukafizeh, Yifurash, now we can understand all the questions that we asked. The Noach Matzachen. What does it mean, Noach Matzachen? You know why not Chen? Right? Even though he was a tzaddik, he was only the secondary neshama in this body. Because Moshe Rabbeinu was the ikar. So it wasn't that Noach wasn't a tzaddik. And it wasn't that Noach wasn't a tamim. But when Moshe HaKadosh Baruch Hu saved Noach, he saved because of the ikar neshama, which was Moshe Rabbeinu. That's the secret that Rashi is teaching us. He found chen. What was the chen? That in Noach was Moshe Rabbeinu. Who's chen? Why is Moshe Rabbeinu chen? That's a separate discussion, not for now. But because of that, it says Noach Matzah chen. You know why Matzah chen? In Noach Hashem found chen. Who's chen? Moshe Rabbeinu. B'schus neshama zu nitzal. K'mo sheyadanu shegam achar kach b'yosem Moshe Rabbeinu nitzal ma'mayim. We know that Moshe Rabbeinu again was saved from the waters. V'zeh sham ha'kasav Ela told us Noach. Mashazocha lihinatzel. The gam sheyiskaymu todos. If this that Noach was worthy to be saved, and he has children, who ayidei Noach ish tzaddik tamim haya b'dayroisav. Noach was a tzaddik in many generations, not only in this generation, but also in the generation of the Mitzrayim and the Midbar. And that's why it says Noach twice. One is to reference Noach, Neshama Noach, and the second is a reference to the second Neshama, which is Moshe Rabbeinu, which if you take the words Noach and you flip it around, it's Chen. And that's why Hashem says, the Noach Matzah Chen. Ki ba'oischa, within you, says the Ben Ashri, Re'isi Tzadik, Asuhi Tzadik. Who's the Tzadik? Moshe Rabbeinu. So when Rashi says Eine Kedai, means on his own he was not worthy. Yes, he was a Tzadik. Yes, he was Choshev. But when he compared to that Noach also had within him the Neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu, so the reason that Hashem saved Noach was because of Moshe Rabbeinu, not because of the neshama of Noach. And now, Elamizman hayas oisu neshama beguf nifla gadol han Moshe Rabbeinu. So now the Ben Lashri says that Noach had this gewaldige schus that Moshe Rabbeinu was within him. The problem was that Noach did an avera. When he planted the geffen after leaving the Mabel, and it's brought down that he fell into the trap of the Satan and he became drunk, and we know the avera that happened to him, that neshama left. And as a proof, if you look at the way the Torah describes Noach from that point on, calls him Ish Adama. So very good. So we answered the 4 questions with a beautiful new understanding of who Noach was. Noach wasn't just Noach. Noach was also the tzaddik Moshe Rabbeinu. That's why it says Noach twice. One is the Noach neshama, and the other one is referring to the neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu. Why does it say Bidar Roisov in many generations? Because it includes the generation of Moshe Rabbeinu. Why did Rashi say that Noach himself was not Kedai? You're right, because when compared to the fact that he had Moshe Rabbeinu in him, he was the tuffle, he was the secondary. The main reason that Hashem saved Noach was because of the neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe Rabbeinu himself had to go through the same thing. We also know that Moshe Rabbeinu had to be misaken the fact that Noach didn't daven for the generation, which is something we're going to discuss in a different shir. Why Taka didn't Noach daven for the generation? And in Melu, we see from here this connection between Noach and Moshe Rabbeinu. And based on that, we can answer a beautiful question that the Shem Shmuel, the Sakhachover Rebbe, asks. Now, the Shem Shmuel was the son of the Avnei Nezer. The Avnei Nezer was the son-in-law of the Kotzker Rebbe, Rabbi Nachman Mekotz. More importantly, the Ben La'ashri, and the Ben La'ashri comes, the Tzaddik Miranana comes from the Cheder of Sakhachover, of Avnei Nezer, and the Shem Shmuel, and he asks the following thing. The Shem Shmuel asks, why did the first time, or the second, the main time that we spoke about Noach was that he was a Tamim? When it comes to Avram Avinu, he was not called a Tamim right away. He was only called a Tamim after he got a Bris Milah, after he was Moshe Nefesh himself for the Bris Milah. But it seems to be that Noach got that title even without being Moshe Nefesh. Was Pshat. Avram Avinu, all of Hashem, Acha Kotzit Kosav Misirosav Nashrei, Akidish Hashem. Omuloi, then Hashem said, Yisarach Lefonai, Shetimol, that you should do a Bris Milah, Acha Chaksiv, V'Hayatamim. Mikla, which means to say that Ad HaMilah, that until Avram Avinu had the Milah, Lahei B'Madregas Tamim. Doesn't make sense as the Shem Yishmol Vari. Avram Avinu, all of Hashem, Hayagam even before the Bris Milah, he was much greater than Noach, like we said in Rashi. The Noach Chutzach Sad L'Tamchoi. Noach needed help to be saved. He needed the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu was connected to his neshama. He went on his own. On the contrary, Noach hid in a teva. Avram Avinu fought the whole world. And even after he jumped into the fire, it doesn't say that he was called a tamim. However, the way we now gave a new insight into who Moshe Rabbeinu was, says the Ben Ashri, we can understand that Tuhurim Halalu, these titles, these descriptions, wasn't said specifically on Noach, was Nemru L'Koved Nishmas Moshe Rabbeinu Olav Shalom. Moshe Rabbeinu Olav Shalom Bevada HaYgadol Gami Avram Avinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest, and therefore it makes sense why he's called a Talmud, as it says Anochi Off of Veifer. Now it's very interesting, the description or the way that we know that Moshe Rabbeinu was greater, not because he went to Shemayim, not because he split the Yam Suf, not because he learned Torah from Hashem, not because he knew everything, was because he was the most humble person in the world. Moshe Rabbeinu Olav Shalom Higdil Loime V'Nachnu Ma. What am I? It says that Noach is Shabbos. What does that mean? It means that Noach has a connection to Moshe Rabbeinu, who's Shabbos. Every Gadol, every Tzaddik is a dugma of Shabbos, of perfection. Moshe Rabbeinu, as we know, was given a special gift that he refused. The only time he agreed to take it was on Shabbos. Like we say, Yismach Moshe b'matnas chalkai. There's a special Zman on Shabbos where Moshe Rabbeinu takes this special crown, and there's a special Kabbalistic idea that's brought down that Zman is when Moshe Rabbeinu is like on a certain level. And we say, and we daven, Yismach Moshe Matnas Chalkar. She'oid b'yasem Mitzrayim, himlitz aleim laparoi. And moreover, we know that Moshe Rabbeinu was the one that recommended to Paroi to give us a day off of Shabbos. Why? So Moshe Rabbeinu used the reason that everybody needs a day of rest. Moshe Rabbeinu understood that Shabbos was the makor, the source of the continuation of Klal Yisrael. So we see that Moshe Rabbeinu is connected to Shabbos, and Noach is connected to Shabbos. Why? Because Noach and Moshe are the same neshama. We learn from here a beautiful insight, not only how to approach the psukkah, but how, as Al Pi Derech, Avnei Nezer, Sachachov, everything is interrelated. Everything is not just coincident. We see from here that Noach was a great tzaddik, but really was saved in the schus of Moshe Rabbeinu. Have a wonderful day.